Hello all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in day 7 of Azure Storage account series, today we are going to discuss about file storage service. So let's understand what is Azure File Storage. So as we can guess with the name itself, file storage. It's basically similar to a file share which we generally used in our organizations. But this is the completely managed file share in the cloud which can be accessed as a traditional file system. So like for example, we attach any kind of hard disk or SSD from our servers and we mount it as a local drive. So in similar way, we can utilize Azure File Share as well. But this is completely managed cloud-based file share service. So basically Azure File Storage use SMB and NFS protocol. So these are the protocol which is used to store or to access your file storage service. So we can simply mount the file storage as a network drive in our local system. It could be your Windows, Linux and Mac. It support file over the internet or within the Azure virtual network. So if you are using Azure File Storage and if you want to mount in your local system, then you have to keep in mind the port 445 which is used by SMB protocol that should be opened in your local firewall, and the ISP provider, whatever the internet service provider you are using, that port should be allowed. Otherwise you cannot access Azure File Share in your local system. If you are in a corporate networks, then definitely there you will be have access or you can mount. But if you are using in your local system, you cannot mount. That we will also see in a demo what exact error we will get if we are using Azure File Storage in our net local laptop or desktop, whatever you are using. Now let's understand the features of Azure Files. So it's basically fully managed and scalable file share. So you don't have to worry about the capacity of storage. It can be accessed via multiple virtual machine at the same time. So for example, you have created a once file share and you want to utilize the same file share across multiple servers or virtual machines, you can do that. It supports Azure File Sync. So basically, if you have mounted Azure File Share in one of the two systems, just take example, and you have uploaded the file from one system, then it will automatically visible in another system as well. That we will also see in a demonstration. And also it provide a built-in redundancy option for high availability like LRS, ZRS, GRS. Those options is already available on that. Now we will see a use case where we can use a file share. So shared file storage for multiple virtual machine. If you want to share a configuration files or your logs across multiple servers, you can utilize Azure Files. If you have some kind of lift and shift application for that purpose, also you can utilize Azure File Share. If you want to move your data from on-premise to cloud, that also you can use. For that you have to set up some kind of VPN connectivity from your local system or your on-premise environment to the Azure cloud. If you want to use Azure File for application configuration and logs, you can also use that service. So these are the few use cases I have mentioned here which you can use for Azure File Share. So this is the key difference, like what is the difference between Azure Files and Azure Blob Storage Service. So if we will see the type of storage, what kind of data we can store. So basically Azure File generally used for file based storage and Azure Blob Storage used for object based storage. Still you can use the like the object based storage in Azure File as well, but that is not recommended. Now when it comes to how you can access Azure Files and Azure Blobs, so for Azure Files you have to mount the particular file share as a drive, shared drive, and for Azure Blob you can use from your REST using REST API or using public endpoint which is HTTPS URL, because in Azure Blob we have each object or will have their own particular URL. Now we will see a best for. So basically if you want to use like traditional file share, then in that case it is good to use Azure Files to keep your data or documents, whatever you want to store over there. And Azure Blob Storage is generally used if you want to streamline any kind of media. It could be audio, video, or large files, DB backups. For that purpose, you should use Azure Blob Storage. Now, when it comes to a performance part, so Azure File basically is useful when you have small or medium size files. But if you have a large amount of files in GBs or TBs, then it is good to use Azure Blob Storage. Azure Files support backup and file sync, and for Azure Blob Storage you can use backups, but there is no sync option available on that. Now when it comes to a public access, Azure Files you cannot access over public network. It could be a private network or virtual net, or it some kind of VPN connectivity from your Azure cloud to your on-premise or local, even your local system. But for Azure Blob Storage you don't need any kind of private network. If you want, definitely it is good or it is recommended to use a private network or private Azure storage account, but there is an option you can use as a public endpoint as well. When it comes to storage tiers, so in Azure File basically we have a single pricing model, like whatever data you will store or use, based on that it's similar something called a pay as you go model. Basically you have to use or you will get in Azure Files, that we will also see when we will create Azure File Share. And in Azure Blob Storage we have options like you can use hot, cool, and archive tier. When to use Azure Files versus Blob Storage, so we have already covered this particular part in previous slides. Like, so if you want to utilize or use as a traditional file share, then you can use Azure Files, and if you want to store a large amount of unstructured data, on that scenario you can use Azure Blob Storage service. Now let's move to a demo. So what I am going to do, I am going to create a storage account. Let me go to my Azure portal. So I'll go to storage account. Let me quickly create a storage account. So I will give any random name here, and primary service. I now for this storage account I want only Azure Files. We don't want blob storage and table and queue. So I'm just choosing here Azure Files. Now if you see here performance tier, so we have two options, standard and premium. And the file share billing, you can see pay as you go file share. So it basically as much as you will use, you have to pay for that. And second, we have provision v2, capacity throughput. These two options we have. So I am going with first one. And redundancy type, this is for high availability, so I am going with LRS option, which will cost low. Now rest all the fields I will keep here in default. So here we have an option for network as how you want to access. So I'm enabling here for public access from all network, but we cannot access it. So that we will see. Actually, this is basically we are creating a Azure storage account, not a particular Azure file share. So whatever the features you will get during the creation of Azure storage account, that you can use, because it is not mandatory you can utilize only file share if you have selected during the creation of Azure storage account. Once you create Azure storage account, you have an option, you can use multiple services or features. Like for example, you can use blob storage service, you can use file, you can use table, and you can use, so later on you can configure it. So it is a default option for creating a storage account, so I'm keeping everything is default here. Let me quickly hit and create. So what I'm going to do, the first I will try to create a file share in my local system. Then I will try on Azure virtual machine, which I have already created. So if I go to my virtual machine section, I already have one virtual machine which is VM1. Let me connect to this virtual machine as well. Meantime, our storage account is deployment is in progress. So this is the IP address of our virtual machine 4.21, sorry, 213.58.78. So now let me close, minimize this. Okay, now storage account is ready. Let me go to resources here. So now under data storage we have option containers, file share and queue and tables. So we have created this storage account for file share. So let me quickly create a new file share here, and I will name it demo share. Sorry. Okay, so the name should be in small letters. Let me okay. So the size maximum capacity you can see 100 tera TIV, which is terabytes. That is fine. So you have access to your option hot and cool as well. So now let me go to backup. So I don't want any backup. If you want a backup of this file share, you can do that. You can like use a vault, but I don't want any. So let me uncheck this, because this is simple a demo, so we don't need any kind of backup here. Let me review and create. So the file share, which is demo share, is created. If you see the URL, this is the URL which you can use. Now how you can copy your files over this file share. So if I go here browse options, so whatever the files you will store as part of this file share, all files will be visible here. If you want any kind of directory structure, you can create from here as well. But if you are using as a file share and you want to mount it as a network drive, then the data whatever you will store in your local or servers, that will automatically uploaded here. So the very first thing what I will do, I will try to mount this network share as a drive. So drive letter you can choose. So I am going with, for example, W drive. So here you can see you have two options for authentication. The first option is Active Directory. If you want to use, you can utilize authentication from Active Directory. And if you want access key, which is a default key which is created during the creation of Azure storage account, key 1 and key 2. So with the help of those keys you can do that as well. So this is the PowerShell script which you have to execute in your machine where you want to mount this file share as a network drive. So if I go to my local system, so you can see I have here only two drives, C drive and D drive. I don't have any network file share here. So let me try to mount this file share as a network drive on this particular my local system. So for that what I will do, I will open a PowerShell script. Okay, so let me copy this script and let me go back to my terminal. So you have to just simply run this PowerShell script. The very first part basically it is testing the connection from your local. If uh, the storage account have access from a local on this particular port, which is because SMB protocol work on this 44 port and you cannot change this particular port. And you can see the password it is using a key 1 or key 2, whatever the key is using. This is the access key basically for authentication purpose. So let me click on run. So the very first thing is it's running this particular line 1, which because it's trying to connect. So you can see we got a message unable to reach the Azure storage account via 445 because the network provider, sorry, internet provider which I am using, that blocks this particular port. So I cannot directly connect or directly mount this Azure file share from my local system. So for that there are options available, like you can create either you can use Azure Storage Explorer, or you can use a virtual private network VPN. You can set up from your local system to a Azure cloud. So you can see the script failed here. So it is not mounted. Let me quickly go to my drive letter. So we have only C and D drive only. Now the same script I will run on a Azure virtual machine, which is this one. So let me close this. Here I will search for ISE. Let me copy the script here. Now if I'll go to a network drive of this virtual machine, let me go to File Explorer, and if you can see here we have C drive and temporary storage, which is D drive. So let me close this and let me run the script here. So you can see credential added successfully and network drive or the file share is mounted in this particular virtual machine. If I'll go here, you can see a demo share, which is the file share we have created. Now if I'll create any folders here, let me create a new folder called new, and if I'll go back to my storage account, let me refresh it. So you can see the file which I have created in this virtual machine, it is automatically added here. So this is kind of file share, or it's getting synced. Now if I'll upload any files from this machine, let me browse any files. So let me go to downloads. Okay, let me add this exe file. So if I'll go back to my virtual machine, you can see automatically this file added in the server itself. So if you have a requirement, like if you want to use this file share as a traditional file share, you can do that. And if you want to use as a shared drive across multiple servers, you can do that as well. So this is the example for Windows, how we can mount a network drive in Windows systems. Similarly, if you want to, there is an option for Linux and Mac OS as well. So if I go here, connect option, you can see for Windows we have run a PowerShell script. Similarly for Linux we have a script that we have to run. So for Linux, basically I will create a separate video on that, how we can create an Azure file share on network, or how we can mount network drive in Linux system as well. So that we will see in another video. But for this particular video, I just want to demonstrate how we can create Azure file share and how we can mount the network drive on our virtual machine or server. So that's all for today. If you can see, let me go back one more thing. I just want to show you. So here, if you can see here, operation, under we have two options, snapshots and backup. If you want to take a snapshot of your all the files which you have saved here, you can do that. So you have to just give a name and click OK. And similarly for backup, if you want to create a backup of this file share, you have to create a backup vault, and you can do that. But I'm just want to show you there are two options which we can utilize for snapshots and backup of our files. So that's all for today. I hope it's clear how we can use a file share. So that's all. See you in next video. Thank you so much.